It's Shannon. It's Shannon. It's Shannon. It's Shannon. It's Shannon. Keeping it real. It's Shannon. It's Shannon. It's Shannon. It's Shannon. It's Shannon. It's Shannon. Keeping it real. It's
Hello, and welcome to
Shannon.
Keeping It Real with Shannon live.
It's Shannon.
Crazy enough, because you don't know how it's going to turn out.
It's Shannon. It's Shannon.
My kids empowered me to get out.
What's going on with this remote learning and in the midst of COVID?
Keeping it real.
Working with different elected officials, learning and understanding how to put the community first.
Hello, and welcome to Keeping It Real with Shannon. Say hello to Dr. Vanessa. How you doing,
Hello.
Dr. Vanessa?
How are you, Lottie? I'm here. I'm good.
You think you slick down there in St. Lucia. That's okay. It's all right. You know, it's
Listen.
okay.
As long as
Okay.
we live, I can be anywhere. But I'm here tonight.
Okay, think you down there in the sun, but it's okay. Look, tonight we have heard a lot about different stories concerning human trafficking. The
Yes.
main ones are sexual exploitation and forced labor. Tonight we have invited our special guest from Safe Horizon Anti-trafficking program to share some light on this serious topic. Human trafficking, are you a victim?
Yes, our special guest tonight is attorney ANITA TEEKAH. She is a senior director of the Anti-trafficking program at Safe Horizon. She a dynamic, multidisciplinary team of attorneys, social workers, trainers, and administrative staff that provides holistic wraparound services to all victims of human trafficking. She co-leads the Brooklyn Human Trafficking Task Force with the Kings County District Attorney's Office and the U.S. Attorney's Office for the EDNY, and co-chairs the Task Force Labor Subcommittee. So let's welcome Attorney TEEKAH.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how
Welcome.
are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us because I know you have a very, very busy schedule, but this is a very, very important topic
Yes.
that's taking place that a lot of people, even myself, didn't realize how serious it is, human trafficking and stuff. So tonight we would like to shed some light on it and to let people know what it is, like them realize that they are a victim. So we want to start off with that question. What is human trafficking?
Mhm.
Well, human trafficking is the use of force or fraud or coercion, and those are terms that are very specifically defined under New York state law, and they're more loosely defined under federal law. So the use of force or fraud or coercion to induce an individual to engage in any type of commercial sexual activity or any type of forced labor. And so if you are a minor under federal law and you're engaging in commercial sexual activity, you're automatically considered a victim of child sex trafficking. But for adults, for both labor and sex trafficking, there needs to be force, fraud, or coercion. And the main thing is that the main misconception is that you don't need movement. Movement is not required in order to be a victim of human trafficking. And I think people hear the word traffic and they think, oh, this must include movement. You must be smuggled or moved across a state border or a country border. But you can be trafficked in your own home without ever having left your home. And I think
Wow.
the thing that I really like to emphasize too is that human trafficking has only been a federal crime in the United States for 21 years.
Wow.
21 years.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Because every time I see kids that are missing on television, first thing I think of is human trafficking.
Exactly. That's what I used to say.
Right. It appears to be a lucrative business, but why is it so easy to abduct these young kids?
So, and human trafficking can take so many different forms. We do get a lot of calls from the community about missing Black and brown girls or missing Black and brown youth in particular. Some of them may be trafficked, not all of them are necessarily trafficked. And so these are some other ways where I'm so glad you're doing the show on this topic, where we can talk about what does human trafficking really look like. And so it doesn't actually often happen through kidnappings or abduction. Right. It happens through sex trafficking, as I mentioned. And the reason it can be so prevalent and so common is when we're looking at sex trafficking in particular, really the way that the main mechanism of engaging in sex trafficking for recruiters is they tend to form a romantic relationship with the individual that they're targeting as their victim. And so they might start an intimate bond or a romantic relationship or partnership with a given person. And they tend to focus on people who have really limited or weakened social support systems, who might be immigrants. There's a language barrier. They might be LGBTQIA, self-identified individuals, and they might have been kicked out of their homes. So people who really are vulnerable and don't have a lot of social support. And so when you have someone who's coming up to you and engaging you in this romantic relationship and being very supportive and very loving, that seems like a great evolution and a great step for you until things start to change. And so that's how a lot of our clients are often sex trafficked. Then for labor trafficking, which is far more pervasive than sex trafficking, but it's something nobody ever talks about. Labor trafficking is present in every single work industry in the United States. It's in every single state across this country. And it's in every type of industry that you can imagine, from hospitality to country clubs to massage parlors to cantinas, construction, agriculture, domestic work, you name it.
Wow.
So what it sounds like is like a person that can get control over the individual. And most of the time the individual is become afraid of that person after a while. But also too, now we had talked earlier before when you were saying people also get tricked in it. Like I've heard stories, like I heard the lady telling her story about like she wanted to become a dancer. So she met this guy who said that he could get her a job as a dancer. She was from another country. He could get her a job as a dancer. So she believed him and came over thinking that she was going to get a job as a dancer. And she ended up working out on a farm for over a year before she escaped. So a lot of times when they're coming from other countries, they believe what someone tells them that they can get a better life. Exactly. And that's how they end up getting into it.
Exactly. I mean, and I think it's a universal, desire, right? That no matter who you are or where you are, you want a better life for yourself. You want to provide for your family. You want to support any children that you have or extended family. And so that's one of the main driving forces of migration, that you want something better than your predecessors had and so on, to continue, down the generation supporting your family. And oftentimes in today's world, you did mention that this is a very lucrative business. It's a $150 billion a year business for human trafficking. It's extremely lucrative. And it really preys on people's desire to create a better life for themselves. And so oftentimes traffickers will use fraudulent promises of jobs that don't exist, or they lie about the working conditions or the rates of pay to induce somebody to take an opportunity that turns out to be very different.
And also the 71, they say 71% of the victims are women and the rest are children. I mean, that's like unbelievable.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if we're looking at the global numbers, and human trafficking is such a particularly tricky type of crime because it's so underreported. So I think we're all as a society so much more familiar with child abuse and sexual assault and domestic violence, right? And if we know that those crimes are already pretty vastly underreported and those numbers are already quite high, then looking at human trafficking, which is a crime that is lesser known, it's been criminalized for a shorter period of time under US federal law, then how do we know what the numbers really are? If you don't know that you're a victim of human trafficking, how can this be reported and investigated in any meaningful way that represents the pervasiveness of which it is occurring?
And that's so true, especially if you have a lot of young kids that are runaways. and they're known to the department, to the system, they're not really looking at them as being trafficked, trafficked in any way. So we always look at the women, the young girls. What about boys? Are boys trafficked as well?
Yes, male identified victims are yes, they're absolutely trafficked for both sex and for labor trafficking.
Okay.
And as I started to mention before, if we're looking at the global numbers, the most recent numbers that we tend to use from the International Labor Organization from 2016 indicate that while more than half of individuals who are globally trafficked are female identified, you do have about 30% of male identified individuals of all ages who are
Okay.
sex and labor trafficked. And so we know that male identified victims of sex trafficking are very, very underreported because it's such a taboo type of crime for men, depending on the country you come from and the culture and just the stigma around all of this, right? But women are also very highly trafficked. Children, individuals of all ages, all ethnicities, no one is exempt, unfortunately, from this type of crime.
Okay.
So just take for instance, so say tonight, if someone is watching that may be having some of these red alert signs that you have just named a little while ago about in a controlled situation, or they feel like they're not being treated right, or they did happen to come over from another country believing that they was going to come over here to get a better life or whatever. What are some of the things that they should start preparing when they realize that to get away safely?
Yeah, so this is a tricky one. It depends on what is your particular circumstance with your trafficker. If you are in a sex trafficked scenario right now, which means that you are an individual who is being forced to engage in any type of commercial sexual activity for anything of value. So your partner or somebody a parent, a sibling, somebody else can be forcing you to have sex for food or for shelter, for medication, for a Metro card, if we're talking about New York City, for anything of value, and it's something that you do not want to do, then you are possibly being sex trafficked. And so there are local precincts that you can go to. Polaris operates the National Human Trafficking Hotline. I can give you that number. That's 1-888-373-7888. You can call that number at any time and you will reach an advocate. You will tell the advocate where you're located and they will connect you with a service provider in your local area. If you're being labor trafficked, again, this is you being coerced or lied to or forced to engage in any type of work that you don't want to do. Either you were told that you would be working in one industry, but instead the job turned out to be in a different industry. You were told that you would be paid, say, $15 an hour, but you're being paid, nothing or very little per hour. You're not given breaks. You are made to live where you work. You're driven around by your employer. You're forced to pay for your housing and all of your food after being told that all of those expenses will be covered for you. Your identity documents may be confiscated. So when you came into the United States to work, unless you already were here, your passport, your visa, or any other photo identity documents might have been confiscated. If you're a foreign national, oftentimes the traffickers will threaten to deport you.
Okay, this is good. This is good information, Anika. I really appreciate you coming on. But we're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back and we're going to talk some more from our guest, Miss Anita TEEKAH. We'll be right back.
It's Shannon. It's Shannon.
COVID-19 has changed how we express our faith and gather to worship. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to spreading the word without spreading concern. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts. As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions.
Should I get it?
Is it safe? Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now, get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Hi, we're back tonight with our topic, human trafficking. Are you a victim? And our special guest is Miss Anita TEEKAH. Anita, this is like so mind-boggling talking about this subject because I can't even imagine this goes on, really, truthfully. I can't even imagine this going on, particularly with women. Why are we always the victim of something all the time? It seems like it's always easy to get over on the women, convincing them to do something that, they so easily believe the person that they are talking to, and they'll easily, follow that person and end up in this situation. Like, you the expert, what could you just say to women to be aware of so we don't end up getting in this situation? Because even though we think we are strong and we'll fight and, we'll hit anybody that bothers us or whatever, but it can happen to me, you, Vanessa, any of us,
It can. And what I would want to emphasize here is that if you are or ever become, God forbid, a victim of human trafficking, it is not your fault. It is the trafficker's fault. We need to hold the perpetrators accountable for preying on those who are vulnerable in our society. And those can be anybody. It can be foreign nationals, it can be youth, it can be individuals who don't have a strong support system, it can be those who are living in poverty. And so I think the reason why certain classes of individuals might be more susceptible to being trafficked is because of all of our systemic systems of oppression. We have gender discrimination, we have age discrimination, we have anti-immigrant discrimination. Every kind of ism and oppression and discrimination you can imagine is already operating against different segments of our society, both within the United States and in every country around the world. And so when you already are operating within this multifaceted system of oppression, so I'm a woman of color. So first, I'm female. Second, I'm young appearing. Third, I'm a woman of color. Fourth, I'm an immigrant. And so these are all things that can sort of be stacked against me in our current society that would potentially render me vulnerable to trafficking or to any other type of crime or victimization that preys upon those particular characteristics. And so, yes, it's important to keep an eye out, to question things that are told to you in terms of job opportunities that seem too good to be true. It's not a crime to want to secure a better life for yourself, but we like to tell our clients, make sure that you get a work contract in a language that you understand. A lot of our clients are given either there's no work contract at all governing the terms and conditions of their job, or it's in a language that they don't understand. If someone is trying to confiscate your identity documents, that's a red flag. If you're not being paid the wages that you were promised or given the breaks or the benefits that you were promised, that's a red flag. If all of a sudden you owe a lot of debt to your trafficker and the debt continues to accrue to the point where you will never be able to pay it off, that's a big red flag. If you are in a relationship with somebody and your partner is now saying that I have housed you, I have fed you, I have taken care of you, I took care of you when no one else cared about you, and now you need to have sex with these individuals for money to pay me back, that's a huge red flag. And so every human's entitled to dignity, to the right to life, to dignity, to respect. And so that carries over regardless of the type of trafficking we're talking about.
So I know that the human trafficking partners with law enforcement and hospitals. How can it be a way that they can partner and collaborate with the Board of Education, the churches, faith-based institutions where women congregate, beauty salon, nail salons, in those places? Is it a way to get the information out there where it can be some kind of code word or something that somebody can say, I'm in trouble?
Right. So that's a really good question. And I think it recognizes that there's so many different parts of society that are interrelated, right? People are going everywhere all the time. I mean, maybe it looks a little bit during the pandemic, but eventually this will be over. And so as service providers, we routinely go out into the communities. Now it's virtual outreach, but we offer trainings to medical providers, to faith-based institutions, to community organizers and community organizations. So they are equipped with the same knowledge that you're getting right now. So when they come across an individual who has any of these red flags or these vulnerabilities, they can keep an eye out and say, hey, I think this might be happening to you depending on, your circumstances, these are some resources that we can provide to you if you're interested. So what's very interesting is that for a number of our clients, especially those who were trafficked in the home as domestic workers, one of the few places that they were allowed out of the home on their own was to faith-based services, to go to church, to go to temple, to go to any other type of religious institution. And a number of our clients disclosed to fellow congregants that they were being trafficked. And that is how some of them were able to escape, because of the relationships they formed with their fellow worshipers. So these relationships, this outreach, this awareness is extremely important, because you never know when you might come across a person who's a victim of trafficking. And if you know what to ask and you know what to look for, odds are that you can hopefully help connect people to more resources. But we do want to caution that this can also be a very dangerous and tricky situation, right? And so we would never advocate going up to a suspected trafficker, but instead to find, ways to connect individuals to services if they want to be connected in a way that's safe for you and for them. And so oftentimes that might mean involving law enforcement or reaching out to a community service provider and getting some technical assistance on that front.
Do you remember a while back, that was when Trump was in office, the immigration status about the people being over here working? Now, people that was brought in by, the big time people, Congress people, whoever they were, bringing people in to work for them and everything. And some of the people are not getting, paid what they should be paid, because, like you said, they don't know any better. So they're working for these people. So even though they might not be getting paid what they're supposed to be getting paid, would you also consider this part of human trafficking as far as forced labor, because they are working in this place, in this home, rather, but they still not being valued and getting what the money they're supposed to be getting? Is that considered the forced, working labor under the anti-trafficking?
Like the U.S. shops.
Yes, you know what I'm talking about. When all of that broke out, everything came up about who was working for who.
Yes.
So all that came out at that time. So is that considered like trafficking labor?
So it depends. And as an attorney, I'm always going to go back and look at the law. What does the law say in terms of what is the legal framework into which we fit human trafficking? So we need to have, as the cornerstone, we need to have some indicia or criteria or evidence of force or fraud or coercion. And so we have had clients who they were trafficked, but they were paid. They might not have been paid what they were promised to be paid, but they could have been paid pennies on the dollar or $20 a week. And just because they're paid doesn't mean they're not trafficked, right? But if there is no force or fraud or coercion, and we can talk about, what those things mean very specifically, and those are very particular legal concepts under the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. But without one of those three forces at work, it would be difficult to make out a case of human trafficking, notwithstanding any other evidence that we have. So force is food deprivation, it's sensory deprivation, it's keeping somebody physically confined, it's keeping somebody under surveillance, it's using any type of physical or sexual assaults against a person to keep them in their situation. So that's pretty self-explanatory and straightforward. When we're talking about fraud, we see this often in the context of labor trafficking. So as I mentioned before, lies and misrepresentations and false promises about the type of work that someone will do, how much they're paid, what breaks they'll have, whether their food and their housing is included as part of the work contract, how much their visa will cost, and anything related to the work conditions. And so if anything about that turned out to not be true, you need a totality of the circumstances, so to speak, to determine whether it rises to the level of trafficking. And then for coercion, this often comes in the form of threats to deport foreign nationals to immigration. That's a pretty strong threat, particularly under the last administration. These are confiscation of your identity documents. This is threats to harm your family in the home country. The traffickers can come from your same ethnic and national classes, right? And so if you are trafficked from, say, Nepal into the United States, and your traffickers are Nepalese, and they are still located in the villages or the towns where your family lives, then when they threaten to harm your family, if you as the worker tried to leave, that's a very real threat.
All right.
And so these are very strong coercive mechanisms that keep somebody in the circumstances of trafficking.
Well, Anita, this has been a wonderful conversation, and really for this part of the show, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time, to come on and talk about it. And we're going to continue this conversation, in our after show when we finish this part of the show. So I want to thank you for coming on this part of the show. And we want to thank everybody for watching. I hope you have gotten something out of watching today. And we want to thank Anita. But right now, as you know, this is Women History Month. And for this night, I would like to salute the single moms that's taking care of their children, because I think they don't get enough praise for what they do by themselves with their children and stuff, and taking care of their family. So I want to salute my 2 daughters tonight. And my first adopted daughter is Miss Allison Maurice. Allison is a single mom raising her son, Tyler. She works very hard in the health field. She does experimentation on the mouse to help with testing vaccines and other types of medicine. I call her Dr. Maurice without a medical license. She learned all of this without going to med school. She is very passionate about her work. She is a no-nonsense mom that takes care of her son, making sure he is getting a good education, involved in karate, I'm scared of him, and various sports. She manages to do it all. I am so proud of her. I salute you, Dr. Allison Maurice. And now my next single mom is my real daughter, Tiffany Shannon, a single mom raising her daughter, Bree. She is a strong, caring mom working in the insurance field, dealing with legal matters. She has been told by many lawyers and judges that she is missing her calling. She is a lawyer without the SESQ. She represented her aunt in a lawsuit as her advocate and helped her win her case. The judge said to her, "Why are you not in law school?" She takes care of Bree, making sure that she is getting a good education, doing gymnastics, and taking sewing classes, because Bree wants to be a fashion designer and another Gabby Douglas. She manages to do it all. It makes me proud to see her being such a good mom. I salute you, Tiffany Shannon. My third woman is every single mom and all the mothers that's taking care of their children who are struggling to raise their children. It is not easy. We need the whole village. You are strong, beautiful women who deserve to wear the crown. On behalf of the crew, Dr. Vanessa, Keeping It Real with Shannon wants you to know that you are appreciated for everything you do for your family. You may not always get the praise that you deserve, but remember, God will give you the praise and the strength you need. We salute all the single moms and all the mothers for Women's History Month celebration.
Amen.
So I thank you, all you single moms and mothers who is doing such a wonderful job raising the kids, because it is not easy today to try to raise even 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know how they do it, but I salute all of you for doing it. So we want to thank you all for watching this part of the show. As always, make sure that you go to Facebook and YouTube and watch us on there. And every Saturday at 5:30 on Brooklyn Free Speech and Manhattan Neighborhood Network. So as always, we'll see you next time. Remember, stay around for the after show. We're coming right back. Take care. See you next time.
Today's show is sponsored by Abu's Bakery. If you have a sweet tooth, stop by Abu's Bakery for some delicious cakes and pies.
It's Shannon. It's Shannon. It's Shannon. It's Shannon. It's Shannon. It's Shannon. Keeping it real. It's Shannon. It's Shannon. It's Shannon.
We're back for our after show. Thank you, Miss Anita, for sticking around.
Sure.
What I wanted to do now is I wanted people to find out more about the anti-trafficking program at Safe Horizon. Like, what is it that you actually do there? I mean, we have an idea of what you do, but just tell us, what do you do when someone is referred to you or when a client comes in and they need help? Like, how do you work with them? What is the first thing happens when they come?
So the first thing is we ask, what do you need? So we have different teams of different focus areas within the anti-trafficking program. I have a team of social workers, and they work with all of our clients. So our foreign national clients, our U.S. citizen clients, and they can provide comprehensive case management. So if somebody's looking for housing, or they want to enroll in an educational opportunity, or they're looking for a job, or they need access to public benefits, or they need a medical, dental, or mental health referral, we can work with you to help you with that. And in that same vein, we also provide limited financial assistance. So we can provide gift cards so clients can get food for themselves and their family. We can give Target cards so they can buy personal care items, including diapers and medicine. We can give out Metro cards for transportation to get to work and doctor's appointments. And then for a number of our clients, their phones might have been controlled by their traffickers or confiscated by their traffickers. So depending on our funding streams at the time, we can also purchase new phones for them in minutes so they can communicate with us and with others in a safe way. And then on the other side, for social work, we do trauma-focused therapy. And so we have clients who come to us and they have a place to live and they have a job and they're pretty stable from a material perspective. But now they're ready to deal with the trauma that has really pervaded their life as a result of their trafficked experience. And so we have clients who've been working with us for a few years to work through their trauma and to develop healthy coping mechanisms and to really self-empower. So that's the social work side. And then on the legal side, I have a team of attorneys who provide immigration relief for our foreign national clients. So there are certain immigration remedies that are available just to victims of human trafficking. And so depending on the legal needs of a client, the attorneys will do an intake and they'll assess the client to determine their eligibility for these trafficking-based immigration remedies. And oftentimes clients have other legal needs as well. And we work very closely with legal aid and with other legal providers throughout New York City. We do policy and advocacy. I oversee that part of the program. And some clients want to be survivor advocates in the community and use their lived experiences to help others. And so we help support them in that. We do trainings and outreach, and we have a survivor leadership group called Voices of Hope.
Yes, I'm interested. What about on the immigration context of it? What happened when women come to you for services that are here, could be legally and illegally, and they don't have their passports? Are they at risk of being deported?
Yes, potentially they can be. And so we have had clients who actually were in ICE detention because they were arrested during a workplace or worksite raid or operation. And so luckily, during the course of their detainment in ICE and the ICE detention facility, they were identified as a victim of human trafficking, either by the ICE agent or by an attorney or somebody else. And so then they were connected to us or another provider for services. But we will never know how many individuals were trafficked into the United States and have since been deported back to their home countries or elsewhere when they were victims of human trafficking and they potentially were eligible for immigration remedies to stay in the United States. So we'll never know that number. But many of our clients who come to us are undocumented, even if they came into the country legally. And so that's another big misconception, that so many of our labor trafficked clients come here on visas connected with the work that they intended to do or that they were promised they would do. And a lot of our temporary non-immigrant worker visas are tied to a particular employer. So if you come here on, say, an H-2A visa to do temporary seasonal agricultural work, and your employer is abusing you and trafficking you, under the circumstances in terms of that visa, if you were to leave that employer because of abusive conduct and trafficking, now you're out of status, even though you've left your employer as a means of self-preservation and protection. And so by the time the clients come to us, they're out of status, but it was because they were seeking to protect their own safety.
Okay, so wait a minute. Hold up. So you are saying if they leave their abuser, go report it to the police or whomever they report it to, saying that, you know, this person is abusing me, I'm afraid for my life, blah, blah, blah. So then the government in turn wants to send them back where they came from, even though they are telling you that they're afraid for their life. I mean, so is this a different law from the other one, immigration law?
So what you just described, it's a little bit different than what I was talking about. So we have clients who might have spoken out against abusive employers, right? And so maybe they're here on a temporary work visa that's tied, that's specific to that employer. And so we have workers who might speak out and say, this is abusive, you know, you need to stop doing this. And once the workers start to speak out, the employer can say, I will have you deported. I will threaten to have you deported. I will say that you stole from me. I will say that you are being laid off or severed from this job. And once I don't need you anymore, you can't stay in this country under the terms of your visa. And so at that point, you're not documented. And so, but we also have clients who've gone to law enforcement and they've reported being trafficked or experiencing some type of abusive work condition, and law enforcement does investigate that as human trafficking. And then they work with us and they work with the victim to secure any type of legal status that the client might be eligible for them to stay in the country. So there's a number of different ways that this can go.
So that's what I'm saying, because that's probably why, you know, the abuse continues the way it is, because they're too afraid to say anything, because if they don't have money to take care of themselves, they don't have money to get back home or whatever, so they have to take their chances and stuff. So, I mean, I don't even know what to say at this point. I don't even know what to say, because I just can't believe people are treated this way.
I know.
Yeah,
and it's very pervasive, and that's the sad thing. It happens everywhere. Like you can go into a bodega in New York City, you can eat at a restaurant, you can walk by a construction site, you can take your clothes to the dry cleaner, you can take your car into the mechanic's garage. Trafficking happens in all of those work sites.
And it's sad because there's so many people out there that's trafficked, and you don't know, young kids, people out there reaching for help, crying for help. And then you got to wonder, is this really trafficking or is it organ harvesting? But that's a whole nother show. But, you know, but this human trafficking is so prevalent and is in broad daylight. And it's broad daylight, you know, it's being prior law enforcement. I couldn't understand that these cases were like, in local communities, right under your nose. It's right in the community.
Exactly. Yeah, because that was amazing. Because that's why when you hear them talking about human trafficking, like I said, I always thought like Dr. Vanessa said at the beginning about the young ladies or boys or whatever being snatched off the street, you know, and so into that work. And that's what I always thought it was. I didn't think it could be something as simple as you working for somebody and they just abuse you, you don't want to pay you, or, you know, or something like that, because that's why there's so much going on, and that we don't know about it because it's kept so, you know, so quietly and everything, you know, like that. So, but I mean, what can we do? How are we going to stop this? How are we going to stop human trafficking? I mean, what do you do? Is there anything that, no, I'm just saying, is there anything that we can do? What do we need to do as community people? Or individual people, what do we need to do to help stop this? Because it seems like it's just getting worse.
Well, there are things we can do. I mean, those of us who work in the field still have hope. Otherwise, we wouldn't keep doing this work day in and day out. We have to believe that eventually, through our collective effort, things will get better. So we do a lot of trainings and we do presentations. We try to train law enforcement that when you're looking at particular cases of, say, domestic violence, instead of just looking at it through the domestic violence lens, ask some more questions and see if maybe there's sex trafficking or labor trafficking going on there. And for example, you can have two partners who are in a domestic dispute that becomes physical, right? But then you ask the right questions. And this actually was a case where this woman came in and she reported that her partner had physically assaulted her. But then the officer went back another day and asked some more questions. And the reason that the partner had physically assaulted the woman was because she hadn't earned enough money that day selling whatever he was wanting her to sell. So because she didn't bring in enough money in the job he was forcing her to do, he physically assaulted her in retaliation. So there we're getting at a different type of victimization on top of the DV. So that's hugely important for training law enforcement. If we're talking about the community, we need to advocate for worker rights. The reason that there's so much worker exploitation and such prevalent abusive work conditions is because we as a society allow it. We want everything at a really low price. And, usually migrant labor is cheaper labor, and there's a reason for that. And we need to advocate for strong worker protections in the United States and around the world. And then going back to something that we were talking about earlier, we need to speak out against systemic systems of oppression, right? So if we're talking about systems in which women, female-identified individuals, LGBTQ, self-identified individuals, youth, those who don't speak English, any those with mental or physical disabilities, anytime there's any grounds or possibility for any type of discrimination, we need to ensure that there are adequate protections in place for people so that they're not exploited and they're not abused and they're not potentially trafficked, and that instead their human rights and their civil liberties are respected. And that's how we start to combat this and get at it. But we can only do that as a society where we're all working in concert with each other in our own individual spheres, right? I can't do it alone. No one person or organization can do it alone. But as long as we do what we each individually can do, when you put those collective efforts together, you really will see a change.
Well, let Dr. Vanessa, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just curious to know that since these are young kids, why is this not being taught in the school as an awareness? This is.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it depends. I think we have been talking with Department of Education, and we're very interested in partnering to figure out like what can this look like in terms of rolling out curriculums. You have healthy relationship curriculums. You have a lot of different service providers. You have ACS, which is a government entity, who are in schools. They're teaching the foundations of healthy relationships and healthy dynamics and interpersonal dynamics. But we also really need to talk about healthy work relationships, right? It's not just sex trafficking like we've talked about. Labor trafficking is far more pervasive. And so we know that youth in New York City and all over the country, they're working. Kids want to make money. They have to make money. They need to support their families, or they want to put themselves through school. Once you have your working papers in New York at age 15, 16, 17, there are different levels of responsibility and hours that you can work. But it doesn't mean that youth are not being exploited by employers. And so you also need to know what your rights are as a worker in this economy.
Let me ask you this last question, because I know your time is valuable too. But well, two things before I get to the last question. You're available to come to the school and speak, right? You can come to the school as a speaker and speak on this topic, right?
We have
You can do that
in schools and for parents and for educators. Yeah.
Okay, good. That's great to know. So when we get back to school going, then that'll be a good thing for you to come into the school. But this last question, you don't have to answer it though, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Because it's such a big business in the billions of dollars. Do you think the government can stop this, or they just not trying to stop this human trafficking, particularly people that comes from another country here? because there has to be something shown. Something has to be showing up someplace for them to know that this is going on, because it's just too much of it going on. Because I always see that when there's a lot of money being made with something, particularly like drugs and guns, they always claim they can't get the drugs off the street, they can't get the guns off, but they're coming in from other places. So why is it that you can't stop it at the border, or wherever it comes in, before it gets over here? So is this something the same thing? Because if they're making $1 billion or more in trafficking, something doesn't smell right here.
So different state governments and the federal government, they're engaging a lot of resources and personnel and different initiatives to combat human trafficking in all different forms. But it's so pervasive and it's so complicated, and it's present in every type of work industry and every urban, suburban, rural, geographic locale in the United States. This country is enormous. And when we're looking at our complex network of local, state, and federal government systems, then how do we coordinate all of these efforts to make sure that we're putting the right attention and focus in as effective and efficient a way as possible? And so a lot of effort is being made and resources are being invested, but the magnitude of the problem is so huge. And so it's going to take sustained, continued effort.
Well, you know, I think I can speak for Dr. Vanessa. So I'm going to take my glasses off to you tonight.
Absolutely.
Such inspiration, and you're so compassionate about what you are doing to help somebody else. And I know you've been in this a while. You've been in this even before you say you came to Self Horizon. You was working in, human trafficking and stuff like that. And you are still young. You're under 30. You're under 30, and to be a lawyer doing this work, I commend you. And you also are going to be saluted tonight for Women's History Month. And I think that Dr. Vanessa feels the same way that I feel about that.
I absolutely echo the response.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And, we hope God will continue to bless you and give you the strength to continue doing this work on behalf of the victims that's out there. And we just thank you. We thank you, and we salute you tonight. And thank you for coming on and, sharing this information with us. And hopefully, if someone is in this situation, they'll figure a way to get out of it or whatever. So we want to thank you again. And we want to thank all of you for staying with us to the after show and staying with us for the first part of the show. And remember, you can watch us every Saturday at 5:30 on Brooklyn Free Speech and Manhattan Neighborhood Network at 2:30. Tuesday nights, we're 8:00 p.m. on Facebook and YouTube. So thank you for watching tonight. And as always, we'll see you next time.
Thank you.